Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show, Matt, and I think this one is a little bit special.
Yeah, I think this is a topic that we've never touched on. Brian is going to lead us through a little horse racing history.
Horse racing history, Matt. Yeah, we're going to talk about the unsung heroes today, folks. Horses, great horses that were unfortunately, for whatever reason, never able to take home an Eclipse Award. Watch it all right now with me and Matt here on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the super pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast, Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I am okay, Brian Zipsy. I hope that all of our HorseCenter fans are doing well in these tough times.
Yeah, tough times indeed, Matt. We're doing the best, and like many people have told me, that this is a welcome a way to kill some time, I guess, while they're stuck at home now with COVID-19 still going strong out there. Remember to stay safe, folks. Hey, Matt, we're going to do a special show today. The Santa Anita Derby has been postponed. It will not be run. The Santa Anita Derby Day, Santa Anita Oaks, was scheduled for this Saturday. As you all know by now, Santa Anita is closed temporarily. So Matt and I decided to do something a little bit different this week, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it. Matt, we're going to talk about the great horses of our lifetimes that never were able to win an Eclipse Award for whatever reason. We're going to kind of run down our favorites, folks. And before we get lots of messages that say, what about so-and-so? We're doing our best. This was not an easy list to compile. And since I'm the older of your two HorseCenter hosts here, we only went with my lifetime, which dates back about 51 years, which would take us to, of course, 1969. I'm not going to go quite back that far, though, Matt, for the first horse on our list, and I think the best horse on the list. I don't know if you agree with that, but for me, the best horse of my lifetime that never won an Eclipse Award was the great son of Raisin native, Alydar.
I think that's a pretty good statement. That's hard to argue with Brian. Not only was Alydar a talented horse on the track, he was a great sire, and he had the misfortune of racing the same year as another very great horse, Affirmed, and their battles in the Triple Crown are historic.
Legendary, Matt. And I know you were an Affirmed guy while I was an Alydar guy, so I thought you might want to take a shot at Alydar. But you're right. I'm glad you mentioned him as a sire, but before his untimely death, he was on his way to becoming one of America's truly great sires. He sired so many good horses early in his stallion career, but on the racetrack, Matt, that's where I really remember Alydar best. Hey, he won 14 to 26 starts. Of course, that record would look a whole lot better if it wasn't for Affirmed. We can never forget that Kentucky Derby Preakness and then that Belmont, maybe the greatest race I've ever seen, with him and Affirmed going down the stretch together, down the second half of the race together. Frankly, it was one of the all-time greats. But let me say this about Alydar, Matt. The race before the Triple Crown with Affirmed, where he ran a good second in each of them, he won the Bluegrass Stakes by 13 lengths. The two races after the Triple Crown, immediately following that grueling Triple Crown, Matt, he won the Arlington Classic, a bigger race back in those days, by 13 lengths. And then he came to Saratoga against older horses and won the Whitney by 10 lengths. I think that says a lot about what kind of horse Alydar was, Matt. He was born the wrong year.
Yeah, and it certainly says a lot about the kind of horse that Affirmed was, and keeping in mind that Alydar did turn the tables on Affirmed a few times, twice as a 2-year-old, and in the Travers by disqualification.
Yeah, I thought he was going to win that Travers that year, and I was there for the Champagne, of course, when he rolled right down the middle of the track by Affirmed. But hey, Affirmed had the better of him. Alydar never got a championship. What a great horse, never got a championship. Born the wrong year will be a common theme of these, Matt. Another horse we should mention real quick, and I know a lot of horses, a lot of people kind of look at Sham as kind of a legendary anti-hero, if you will. Sham ran a great Kentucky Derby, ran a great Preakness, but of course he ran into Secretariat. He only won 5 races lifetime, but Sham was a heck of a horse, Matt, and I think he peaked at the right time. He just peaked the wrong year.
Yeah, and keeping in mind, you said he only won 5 races, but he only ran 13 times in his career. He actually won the Santa Anita Derby, a talented horse, and hey, you lose the Secretariat in all 3 of the Triple Crown races. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, he gave Secretariat all he wanted in those races, including the first half of the Belmont. Sham came back with an injury. Secretariat went on to a legendary run the second half of that Belmont Stakes, of course. Speaking of great Triple Crowns, Matt, how about we go back to the year of my birth, 1969, because Arts and Letters, Majestic Prince, there were some other good horses that year, Dyke and Top Knight, but Majestic Prince and Arts and Letters truly ran a great Triple Crown series. Majestic Prince came from California, where he was undefeated. He won the Derby in his 8th lifetime start. He won the Preakness in his 9th lifetime start. So through the Preakness, this horse was 9 for 9. That's more victories than Seattle Slew or, of course, Justify. And then his legendary jockey turned trainer, Johnny Longden, wanted not to run him in the Belmont with a tendon injury. His owner talked him into it, Matt. It didn't end well, although he ran second still with that injury behind the great Arts and Letters.
Yeah, you think about that, Brian, being in running in the wrong year, win 9 out of 10 and 2 legs of the Triple Crown, and then finish second in the Belmont, and you don't win a championship. Tough thing was he ran into Arts and Letters, who not only won the Belmont, but then went on to have several big victories against older horses. And that's what got him the championships.
Yeah, kind of sad that Majestic Prince never ran again after that probably bad decision to run him in the Belmont going for a Triple Crown back in 1969. Speaking of the wrong year, we talk about it so much with the boys, the Colts, the Triple Crown series, but what about Bold and Determined, Matt? She won the Kentucky Oaks, she won the Acorn, she won the Coaching Club Oaks, she won the Masquerade. She won several other stakes, Matt. This filly was sensational. 16 of 20 lifetime, and somehow she didn't win an Eclipse Award. Somehow she wasn't the champion 3-year-old filly, Matt.
Yeah, almost won $1 million that year. Had 4 Grade 1 victories in a row as a 3-year-old. Sounds like a championship season to me, but there was one other 3-year-old filly who spent some time beating the boys.
Yeah, Genuine Risk was something special. However, I was at Belmont Park early fall that year, Matt, for their only meeting, Bold and Determined Genuine Risk. Say what you will about Genuine Risk not being at her absolute best after that grueling Triple Crown where she ran first in the Derby, a suspect second in the Preakness when she was mugged, and second in the Belmont. But Bold and Determined looked her in the eye in that Masquerade with a lot of good older fillies behind them. And Bold and Determined was bold and determined in not letting Genuine Risk buy her that day in the Masquerade. Bold and Determined, trained by Neil Drysdale, one of the great fillies of my lifetime, but she never won a championship. I got to mention a favorite of mine, a recent favorite of mine, Matt, because Princess of Silmar, speaking of good seasons, how about Princess of Silmar's 3-year-old season? Kentucky Oaks, Coaching Club American Oaks, Alabama, Beldame. All told, she won 6 stakes in her 3-year-old fillies season, including those 4 huge Grade 1s. Princess of Silmar never won a championship.
Yeah, it got down to heading towards the Breeders' Cup distaff, and owner Ed Stanko had to make a decision about, hey, she's had a long campaign, she's accomplished so much. Do I go in the distaff and take a risk in there, or do I, give her a break and sit on her record and maybe win the Eclipse Award? Well, Stanko was a sport, and he wanted to compete. Went to the distaff. Princess was at the end of a long campaign, and it was Beholder, the great Beholder, who won.
Yeah, the great Beholder. Matt, I think Princess of Silmar would have won a championship had she not run out in California. Certainly a track that didn't fit her closing, grinding style. And Beholder was a wonderful horse who only got better with age. Princess of Silmar, unfortunately, was retired in the summer of her 4-year-old season, but an awfully good filly recently who never won a championship. Matt, did you realize that Lure, one of the best turf milers America has ever produced, he's in the Hall of Fame, but he never won an Eclipse Award?
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a number of horses that we're going to talk about today were just that talented that they never won an Eclipse Award, but eventually ended up in the Hall of Fame. And why shouldn't that be the case with Lure? He ran from 1991 to 1994, won $2.5 million, won on dirt and turf, but certainly best known for consecutive Breeders' Cup Mile victories.
Yeah, Lure's Breeders' Cup Miles wins were certainly memorable, the way he just took the race to him early and just kept on going. I remember the fractions he set in those Breeders' Cup races. You didn't want to run with Lure early, but then you couldn't run down Lure late. Interestingly, Matt, he had his first 7 races. We all remember Lure as turf horse. His first 7 races were on dirt. And he dead heated in the Gotham. He wasn't dead heated for the win in the Gotham. He wasn't a bad dirt horse, just not the kind of horse he was when he took to turf. And yeah, Breeders' Cup Mile after Breeders' Cup Mile, Lure was something special on the turf, as was Exceller, Matt. Exceller's another horse that it's kind of puzzling that he never won an Eclipse Award, but those were the times in which he ran. Exceller was a Grade 1 or Group 1, Grade 1 or Group 1 winner in 4 different countries on the grass. He was a bit of a turf monster. And then, of course, he became really well known for what he could do on dirt later in his career.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing thing, that not only turf, but also dirt later in his career. And as I counted 11 Grade 1 or Group 1 wins. He won a lot of big races in France before he came over. 15 wins total, $1.6 million. Another one, Hall of Fame horse also.
Absolutely, and who can ever forget when he did become a dirt horse later in his career, that magical Jockey Club Gold Cup. Now I remember that race like it was yesterday, when Seattle Sloop broke through the gate, a firm saddle slipped, crazy speed duel in a 1.5-mile race. Exceller came up the rail, and him and Sloop just battled the entire stretch. Exceller beat 2 Triple Crown winners that day, Matt. But we weren't huge Exceller fans back then, Matt. We liked another turf horse who ran against him several times, and he had kind of a good record on both turf and dirt as well. Majestic Light, Matt, one of our favorites. He never won an Eclipse Award either.
Yeah, that's for sure. One of my favorites. I remember seeing him win on the dirt at Monmouth Park in what was the race that is now known as the Haskell. Back then it was known as I think the Monmouth Invitational or something like that. But now it's the Haskell. 31 starts, 11 wins, ran on both coasts on dirt and turf for the Phipps stable in the years 76 and 77.
Yeah, Majestic Light was really excellent dirt horse. He didn't always find the track that he liked on the dirt, but that Monmouth was, it was known back then, and some of the races he ran in California too. Really, really talented dirt horse, but he was better on turf, Matt. And when he took to turf, he took to it in a big way. Never worse than second on turf. And he had some real battles, including with Exceller on the grass back in those, as you said, 1977 Majestic Light. Now, we got to start talking about the California geldings, because there's a gaggle of geldings that, for whatever reason, there were exceptions here and there, but for whatever reason, they did almost all of their best running out in California. When they came east, for the most part, they just didn't find much success. And they're very similar in nature. I'm going to rattle off some names here real quick for you, and feel free to jump in. In the early to mid 70s, there was Ancient Title. He ran for years and years. Best Pal was a horse I always liked too. Top-notch American horse for most of the 1990s, mid-90s. He year after year, Best Pal was top-notch. Then you had more recent horses like Lava Man, who famously just could not get it done outside California, but he did so much in California. And what about Game On Dude, Matt? A horse who probably will get into the Hall of Fame pretty soon.
Yeah, you're talking about Hall of Famers here. Ancient Title, Hall of Fame, 57 starts, Brian. These horses were warriors, but to his misfortune, he ran into the great Forgo, who won championship after championship in that same era. Best Pal, Hall of Fame, 47 starts, and well over 5 million earned. But you know, Brian, back in those days, if you didn't come east and win big races, you had a tough time winning a championship.
Yeah, I always liked Best Pal. You know, he was really good at 2. It's rare, you know, a lot of these geldings get better with age, but it's rare to see a horse like Best Pal, who is just one of the best horses in America at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It just went on for Best Pal, and he was that kind of horse. And some of the races he ran in California were simply dominant. Lava Man, you know, he did it on different surfaces, and Lava Man was truly a legend out in California. And then Game On Dude, he might not have had quite the longevity of Ancient Title, especially, or Best Pal per se, but Game On Dude was right there too. I remember him running a good Belmont long before he became kind of a household name for all those big races he won in California. The California geldings, none of them won an Eclipse Award. And then we have the years where you know, there's a common denominator with a lot of these horses who never won an Eclipse Award. Just one of the common denominators, Matt, is the year. They were born the wrong year, or their year just had a phenomenal crop. And a lot of the years in our lifetime that had phenomenal crops ended in the number 7. Let's start with 1987. Capote didn't run a lot after his 2-year-old championship. Ali Sheba was a champion, a multiple champion. But that 1987 3-year-old crop, and several of them became champions. You know, I guess Personal Ensign was part of that group on the female side, and Gulch was a sprint champion. But Bet Twice, what a nice horse he was. Lost Code, a really phenomenal horse. Lost Code won 12 stakes, Matt. Bet Twice won the Mont by a hole, Matt. And maybe the best out of all of them was a more lightly raced Rokeby runner named Java Gold. Do you remember him?
Yeah, Brian, and you're rattling off all these horses that were part of that crop that were 3-year-olds in 1987, and they just had the misfortune of running into Ali Sheba, who was the champion that year, but Bet Twice, Brian. My goodness, $3.3 million winning the Belmont and the Haskell. Java Gold, 9 wins out of 15 starts and almost $2 million, with big wins later on in the Whitney and the Travers and the Marlboro Cup. You know, some of these races when they were able to get away from Ali Sheba.
Yeah, like I said, Lost Code won 12 stakes in a matter of, a little over a year. Bet Twice, I remember in the Sapling as a 2-year-old, how good he was at 2, Arlington Classic. And, of course, he was second in the Derby and second in the Preakness. Good races behind Ali Sheba. But then that Belmont, he just dominated. Great Haskell, where he beat both Ali Sheba and Lost Code in a 3-horse extravaganza down the Monmouth Park stretch. I still think that's the greatest race ever run at Monmouth Park. But then you had Java Gold, Matt, and Java Gold, he was a good 2-year-old. He won the Reps, and Mac Miller brought him along a little slowly, and I think he was the kind of a big, strong, big striding, late running horse who was going to get better with age. He never ran past 3, but I tell you what, as good as Ali Sheba was, I really thought Java Gold was going to be the 3-year-old champion and the horse of the year at one point, because the way he motored by horses in the last furlong of his races was so impressive. And what he did against older horses in the Whitney and then the Travers against that great field, sloppy track, but it was the same Java Gold, just overpowering late run. And he did it in the Marlboro Cup. Really nice horse, Java Gold. Now, let's talk about another great, we're just going to jump ahead 10 years to 1997, because that was another great crop dominated by Silver Charm. But Captain Bodgett, how good was he before he was retired? Pulpit was in that crop. Touch Gold was a talented horse who stopped Silver Charm's Triple Crown run in the Belmont. I loved Freehouse, who ran second or third in all three legs of the Triple Crown, missed the Preakness by an eyelash. And he was a graded stakes, a top-notch graded stakes winner in 4 consecutive years. But maybe the best of all that didn't win an Eclipse Award from that crop was Awesome Again.
Yeah, Brian, you're talking about, again, very talented horses, both coasts on the east and the west. Pretty amazing. Awesome Again. Didn't have a lot of races, but won 9 out of 12, over $4 million, strung together 6 races in a row, including the Breeders' Cup Classic, and no Eclipse Award.
Yeah, Awesome Again certainly could have won an Eclipse Award as a 4-year-old. It's almost shocking that he didn't. He came onto the scene late as a 3-year-old, but remember, he won the Queen's Plate. He was becoming a really, really good 3-year-old. He's another horse who I've grown to love as a sire. But as at 4, Matt, he was perfect. He was 6 for 6 in his 4-year-old season, and he won a Breeders' Cup Classic in 1998. And Matt, that 98 Breeders' Cup Classic, I think most people would say that was the greatest top to bottom field the Breeders' Cup Classic ever produced. Awesome Again was your winner.
Yeah, and did not win the Eclipse Award. I think he had the misfortune of running the same year as the great and big fan favorite Skip Away.
Yeah, Skip Away was an iron horse, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Skip Away. Of course, he won Eclipse Awards, but Awesome Again did not. All right, 2007, another one of my favorite, more recent crops. And Curlin was a champion, and Rags to Riches was a champion, and Street Sense was a champion. But Hard Spun was not. And Hard Spun, you might say, oh, you're mentioning Hard Spun with all these great horses. But Hard Spun, wow, is he good. He could run any distance, Matt, and he proved that by running in the money in all 3 legs of that excellent Triple Crown, or running well, at least in all 3 legs. I guess he was 4th in the Belmont at a 1.5 miles. I remember what he did to Street Sense in the Kentucky Cup Classic, where he just was never going to let Street Sense by as long as they would run. But maybe the thing about Hard Spun was he might have been even better as a sprinter. We saw a little bit of that in the King's Bishop.
Yeah, and from the barn, and was trained by the good guy, Larry Jones, one of his top horses. I mean, Jones is kind of known for his work with fillies, but Hard Spun, $2.7 million won, 7 out of 13. And as you mentioned, versatility, distances, dry tracks, loved wet track also.
Yeah, you said 7 out of 13. I think he could have been one of our great sprinters of recent years, but 7 out of 13, and he didn't win any of those Triple Crown races. He didn't win the Breeders' Cup Classic, but he ran huge races, especially in the Kentucky Derby, where he was second, and the Breeders' Cup Classic, often with pace pressure. You can Skip Away a little while ago. If you mention Skip Away, it's hard to think of Skip Away without thinking of Formal Gold, because Formal Gold was... He like Awesome Again, he came around a little bit later to the scene of his 3-year-old season, and you could tell he was getting good at 3, and then even at 4, you could tell he was getting good. But by the time the summer of his 4-year-old season rolled around, Matt, he was getting really good. You're a speed figure guy. You remember some of the speed figures that Formal Gold earned?
He had some big numbers when I was looking him up the other day. Saw those big numbers again, and he ended his career with 2 big wins, one in the Island at Monmouth Park and the other in the Woodward.
Absolutely. You know, Matt, he never got to run in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Obviously, we're talking about him. He was never a champion. But what he did to Skip Away, what he did to Will's Way, another really good horse. But what he did to Skip Away in his last two races, which were the Island at Monmouth and then the Woodward to the Belmont, were eye-opening because he didn't just beat Skip Away, he beat him badly. And those are some of the highest speed figures earned in the last 30 years. Matt, Formal Gold, another great horse who never won a championship. Well, we got to talk about some who may have won a championship had disaster not struck them. Caesar's Wish, I want to mention her real quick because she was so good. She was a Maryland filly trained by Dickie Small back in the 70s, and she was a part of a really good group of fillies. She won a lot of races, 2 and 3. Of course, she had a heart attack and died in the Alabama, but Caesar's Wish was a wonderful filly. But I think if we're talking about ill-fated horses who didn't win an Eclipse Award, we gotta talk about Barbaro a little bit.
Yeah, of course, Barbaro coming off a just really, really impressive run to win the Kentucky Derby, became a real fan favorite in the country, and then after he was injured at the start of the Preakness and had ups and downs as he tried to recover from that injury, really captured the hearts of not just racing fans in the country, but sports fans also.
Yeah, and Barbaro really had it all. He seemingly had it all, Matt. Barbaro could win middle distance races. He could win longer races. I think he was only going to get better the longer they ran. He was obviously really good on turf before they switched him over to dirt when he won that Florida Derby, where he was a determined winner of the Florida Derby. And hey, if you're talking about best Kentucky Derby performances of this current century, Barbaro's Kentucky Derby should be on a dominant figure that day at Churchill Downs. Obviously, as Matt alluded to, he got hurt in the Preakness, and the horse that won the Preakness, the lightly raced Bernardini, was the horse that kind of took away the Eclipse Award from Barbaro because Bernardini was so good in that summer and into the fall. If a horse hadn't won so much like Bernardini did, Barbaro probably would have held on to the Eclipse Award after his grave and unfortunate injury. All right, Matt, we're running down this list. Great, and again, folks, there's horses that Matt and I, great horses that we've seen that never did win an Eclipse Award. A little love for some local horses here, Matt. There was a filly. I don't know if you remember her, Matt. A filly in the late 70s, in my developmental time in horse racing, if you will. Her name was Danny Dotsey, and she was kind of a legend in Philadelphia. But she would come up to the Meadowlands, and she would come up to New York, and she would show that she was truly one of the great sprinters. Not just female sprinters, but one of the great sprinters in the country. Danny Dotsey, Matt, won 20 of 24 starts, many of them stakes races.
Yeah, and 12 of those came at Keystone Racetrack. Of course, you and I have made many trips to Keystone, which at some point became known as Philadelphia Park, which of course now is known as Parks Racing, but certainly worthy of mention.
Yeah, Danny Dotsey was around at a time, Matt, when they didn't offer an Eclipse Award for female sprinters. Otherwise, we might not be talking about her today. She was something special, the pride of Philadelphia. How about the pride of Boston, Matt? He was as much New England as Chowder, as they say up there, Matt. Wacoy was a heck of a horse, Matt. You remember Wacoy's running record? I bet you have it there in your notes.
Yeah, I do, Brian. Based at Suffolk Downs, actually ran 19 of his 30 races on the New England circuit. So that meant at Suffolk or at Rockingham Park, which isn't here anymore, which I happen to have gone to once back on my one of my honeymoons. Over $2 million earned, and when he left New England, he won some big races, Brian. He won Grade 1s, the Jockey Club Gold Cup. He won the Brooklyn Handicap twice, which back then was a Grade 1 also.
Yeah, Matt, he was he was something special. You don't see horses from Suffolk going down to New York and winning big races, like you said. Hey, that Jockey Club Gold Cup, by the way, he won by 15 lengths. You don't see that very often anymore. Wacoy was a really special horse. He had some great battles with Ali Sheba, and Ali Sheba had to do everything he could to beat Wacoy, and he did. But Wacoy was a wonderful, speedy gray horse who primarily ran in Boston, but like Matt said, he had a lot of big races in New York. He was purchased out of Keeneland by a immigrant from Italy, and his cousin was actually the trainer of Wacoy, based at Suffolk Downs. One of the best races I've ever seen was a battle in the Mass Cap. Remember, the Mass Cap used to be a big race up there at Suffolk, and him and Broad Brush threw down one afternoon there, and that was a sensational race where Wacoy just denied Broad Brush, another top horse who never won the Eclipse Award. There were a lot of good horses. That was a great era of racing, the late 80s. I guess you think of Ali Sheba and Sunday Silence and Easy Goer and them the most, but there were some really good horses in the late 80s. And Seeking the Gold, for example, another top horse who just ran into 49er in those memorable battles and then was second in one of the best Breeders' Cup Classics ever run. So the late 80s were a great era.
Yeah, that is for sure, Brian. And you mentioned Broad Brush won almost $3 million. I remember his eventful victory in the Pennsylvania Derby.
Yeah, I was in the stands for that Pennsylvania Derby, and I thought he was coming into the stands for that Pennsylvania Derby, and somehow he still won. Geldings, Matt. We talked about the great California Geldings, and I think they deserved top billing here on the greatest horses to never win an Eclipse Award. Almost an Academy Award, Matt. I've been stuck at home too long. Matt, recently King Leatherberry had that wonderful turf sprinter, Ben's Cat. Tough for a turf sprinter to win an Eclipse Award, but Ben's Cat, so good for so long. But what about Better Talk Now? I'm a little surprised that Better Talk Now never won an Eclipse Award.
Yeah, Brian, when you talk about the kind of record that Graham Motion trainee had and his longevity, 51 wins, 51 starts, 14 wins, over $4 million. He ran from 2001 to 2009. I don't know, Brian, maybe it was just his longevity. Those 14 wins were spread out. He had big wins in a lot of those years.
Yeah, 14 wins out of 51. It almost sounds a little like, well, that's pretty good. But Better Talk Now just kept running in big turf races year after year after year, literally year after year. Matt, I bet Better Talk Now in the Saranac. He didn't win the Saranac, but I bet Better Talk Now. I think it was his stakes debut in the Saranac. 7 years later, I bet him in the Sword Dancer. Think about that, folks. 7 years later, we went from the graded stake at Saratoga, the Saranac, to I think he was second in that Sword Dancer at the end of his career. That was as a 10-year-old. Better Talk Now, I don't know if this record will be broken anytime soon, Matt. Better Talk Now ran in the Breeders' Cup Turf 5 times. And of course, he won one and he was second in another. Better Talk Now, a great gelding. Evening Attire was a gelding that people loved in the East Coast. I don't think he was ever super close to winning Eclipse Award, or maybe 1 year he was. He was a popular horse who had a lot of good years in New York. What about Creme Fraiche, Matt? Creme Fraiche, you list the best mile-and-a-half horses of our lifetime. Creme Fraiche won the Belmont Jockey Club in 3 different years. He won consecutive huge mile-and-a-half races. The Jockey Club, of course, was a mile and a half back then, but he won the Belmont Jockey Club as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. He was a mile-and-a-half monster, if you will.
Yeah, in that same period that we've talked so much about, Brian, he was running from 84 to 89, over $4 million in winnings. He was one of those 5 consecutive Belmont Stakes winners for Woody Stevens. I'm not sure where in the 5 did he fall, Brian?
I believe he was second to last, Matt. He was the Spend-a-Buck year, and I was there at the Belmont for most of those Woody wins. Creme Fraiche, I'm pretty sure the horse he beat to win the Belmont in 1985 was Stefan's Odyssey,
Oh.
and Stefan's Odyssey was trained by Woody. So yeah, an amazing feat, Woody Stevens. Woody Stevens really could train horses to go a distance, creme fraiche. A gelding who got it done over several years, but especially those big wins at Belmont, the Jockey Club, and then another Jockey Club. All right, Matt, we could go on, but we're going to stop there. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this rundown of our favorite horses, the best horses, as Matt and I see, who never, for whatever reason, never won an Eclipse Award. This was pretty fun to put together, Matt.
Yeah, Brian, that's for sure. A lot of research to come up with this list.
And I still say Alydar's the best. Are you agreeing with me on this one?
Certainly Alydar has to be at the top because those races against Affirmed were so famous, and that Belmont Stakes was just absolutely amazing. Happened in New York, so Alydar is a darn good one. And hey, folks, if you have some favorites that should be on the list, please share it with us. Put it in the comments section, either on Horse Racing Nation or right there on YouTube, so we can see which ones we might have left out that are your faves.
Absolutely, Matt. Well said. I don't know if that's your parting shot or not, but well said, because I want to see some of these great names that Matt and I didn't mention or forgot to mention or missed. I'm hoping that we got the best of the last 51 years. That's my lifetime. Hey, Matt, do you have another parting shot?
Sure. I just want to say, enjoy the show, folks. Please take care of yourselves. Please stay inside as much as you can. Keep your distance if you're outside going for a walk. We go out for a drive every once in a while in the car with my wife and son to get out of the house a little bit, and that way we're not, interacting with people. It's really important so that we can get back to normal.
Yeah, or you could just watch hundreds and hundreds of episodes of HorseCenter from the last 7-8 years. No, I wouldn't ask anyone to do that. That's tough. All right, folks, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this show. Thanks to our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. Thanks to our great producer, Brett Workman, for putting together this show and dealing with Matt and I every single week. Hey, if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation, please do so. Matt and I will be back with another show during the coronavirus shut-in time for you folks. Never fear, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here for you. We'll see you next week on HorseCenter.